Good morning. I've been asked to talk to you about some of the best practices in sales management. And I'd like to be able to say that this talk is going to be a little lighter than the previous three talks, but not necessarily so. But the challenge now is not going to be technical, it's going to be the human challenge. And Philippe was mentioning I'm associated with Celsius. Celsius has been around since 2011. We're part of a group that has been working with small, medium-sized businesses for over 25 years. So companies that have started up, the founder was probably the best salesperson, they've grown, and all of a sudden they get to a point where they can't just do things informally anymore. They've got to be a little more structured, if only because they're in different locations now. And so we work with a lot of companies in those situations. Now, before I talk to you about some of the best practices, I want to get something off the table. If I had $5 for every time someone said to me, "Oh, I'm not in sales," right? As if selling were some sort of social disease, I'd be a very, very rich man. Why? Have you ever looked at how a 5-year-old works his parents or her parents? Have they figured out who to approach, how to approach them, where the hot buttons are? Tell me, what sales course did they take? I'd love to know. We're all in sales. Everyone in this room is in sales, whether their business card says so or not. And part of the challenge of sales management, if it's the only thing you remember from this 20 minutes as you wait for your coffee, that we all have this potential, and that a major challenge of sales management is to help our salespeople bring out that potential. In many cases, it's taking obstacles out of the way to unleash that potential. Okay? So at this point, we've lost the remote, but we have a manual operator. So the question, are you getting the most out of your sales team? I'm going to give you an idea of some of the things you should be looking for to know whether the answer to that question is yes or no. And a good place to start is here with a chart that talks to you about what are the major drivers of sales performance. And long story short is that at one end, you've got the company value proposition. Imagine I have a pointer here. It's the oval on the left. At the other end, you have the customer value perception. And we all know that the two don't necessarily jibe, right? So the challenge for a company is to do a whole bunch of things to get those two ovals to at least be equal. If you can produce great value for little money, then you're laughing all the way to the bank. Now, sales has a lot to do with value creation, but marketing as well. And you're going to hear from someone after the break about all the wonderful things that marketing does to provide air cover for the salespeople to go in and close the deals. I'm simplifying things a little, but what you need to remember from this slide is that among all the things in the red circle, because that's the sales part of this chart, sales management is a critical part. The other part, marketing, really sets up the framework in which salespeople can perform. Okay, let's put this in context. I spoke to you about the fact that we work mostly with small, medium-sized companies. I'd say over half to 2/3 of the companies suffer from this issue of losing between quotation marks, 20%, salespeople lose 20% of their time per week. Why? Because in some cases they're out chasing the wrong prospects. In other cases, they're not focused on profitable sales. It comes down very often to not getting everything out of a sales conversation so that the sales cycle drags on and on and on and costs significant money to the company. And then, of course, there's the issues we all face in terms of time management, but in the case of salespeople, it can be territory management as well. The amount of time salespeople spend traveling, which they can't put to good use, is a major drain on the profitability of companies. Now, I'm not going to walk you through this matrix. I don't want you to suffer indigestion, but this is the kind of dashboard that we work with our clients in terms of getting their sales management to where it needs to be. And it all starts with the objectives. Okay. The objectives here at the top of the matrix. It's figuring out, all right, the company's telling us we need to achieve this level of revenues in the next year with this level of profitability. Well, the salespeople have to take that and to break it down in terms of, well, where are we going to get this? We're going to get this from existing customers, or are we going to get this from new customers? Are we going to get this from existing products, or are we going to have to come up with new products? How are we going to go from the 35,000-foot level of a strategic plan down to making our numbers? So that's an exercise we get involved with in terms of our clients. And prospecting, obviously, is an important part of getting new clients. But the key here you have to focus on are the existing customers. Why? This is a statistic that comes back time and time again. A lot of you know about the 80-20 rule. Well, it applies to sales. Consistently, we find companies have more than 50% of their clients, which represent about 5% of their sales, and they're gobbling up 25% of the company's energy for all sorts of reasons. And that, as you grow, is an issue you have to come to terms with very, very quickly, because otherwise it's going to drain your profitability. And the way we help our customers manage their portfolio of clients is to build with them an ideal client profile from which we're able to build 3 segments that they need to manage: a segment of high potential clients, a segment of loyal clients, and then the segment where that 5% is, which is an area where there are potentially clients that are become loyal, that are going to become high potential. But at this point, you have to find a way of optimizing your interactions with these people, whether it's simple things like putting them into automation, not necessarily getting back to them on the same day. There's a whole stream of things that goes with each kind of client. So the high potential clients need a certain way of interacting with the company, and people in the company need to understand that. Same thing with the loyal customers, and as I just mentioned, with the smaller customers who represent a small percentage of the revenue. When we talk about having a sales culture, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about having people with a common vision of who our client portfolio is and how to manage it. and it's critical if you want to go to the next level. So there's the portfolio challenge, and now there's the execution challenge. You've defined these different segments, and you've mapped out. You need to map out a sales process for each one of them, and sales scenarios to go with it, because you need to have everyone singing from the same prayer book in terms of what works and what doesn't work in terms of sales process. But people knowing what to do is not the same thing as people can do it and people want to do it and will do it. So when I was talking about how sales management is not as technically complex as the 3 previous presentations, that's where you run into a major challenge, is getting people to have the skills so that they can do what's required to get the sale, but also wanting, being motivated to do so. Now, some of those things you only get by making good hiring decisions. But there are still certain behaviors that people can learn. You're not going to change their personality types, but you can get them to do certain things. They'll never be as good as the best, but hopefully they'll be as good as the best when the best are having a bad day. That would already be a huge improvement in certain cases. So this is the second major challenge with respect to sales management. The third, hopefully. Okay. The third is with the sales manager himself or herself. There are 3 things a sales manager needs to do. Needs to manage, needs to lead, and needs to coach. There are 3 different things. Not everyone's good at all 3. But, you know, here it's a nice day, and the waves aren't too big. But we all know that in business there are terrible days, and the waves are big. And if you are not managing, leading, and coaching your group, then those waves may cause serious damage to your boat and your team. So sales managers, next, okay. One of the things that they need to do is to get out in the field. Sales manager is not someone who stays in the office for meetings and working with other departments. They do some of that, but they need to be out there in the field with their team. When we talked about leadership, sales managers should probably be on the road good 2 days a week with their people, sometimes letting them lead the conversation with the client, on other occasions perhaps leading it themselves, but especially being in a coaching mode. Because look at all the things you have to do in a typical sales conversation. You before the conversation, you need to master the subject of who is this client, what are their interests, how should I approach this, so on and so forth. Then you get in front of the client. You've got your first meeting or another meeting. You've got to be in an assessment mode. You might be there with a particular agenda, but the client's there also with an agenda. So you need to be equipped to ask good questions, to get this assessment of where the client is and how I'm going to have to adjust to that reality. You can't let it go on for 6 months. A lot of salespeople get stuck. They're wonderful at asking questions, but it goes on and on and on and on. and never moves forward, because once you've got just enough, you have to be switching to a seduction mode, right? And seducing people depends on the type of person, the type of personality types. You've probably all at some point heard some salesperson talk about what's it like to sell to a driver? What's it like to sell to an expressive, to an analytical? They're all different ways of selling. And when you're in the seduction mode because you want an outcome at the end of the meeting, you've got to know what works in the case of this particular salesperson. So when I write at the top, a foundation to play sales jazz, you need to think of selling a bit like jazz. There's a lot of improvisation. It's not like being an accountant or an engineer in the sense that there are technical realities that have nothing to do with personality types. In sales, you're into this in big time. And you have to have a sales manager help your people work these different aspects of the conversation depending on who they are and who the person is in front of them. 2 minutes. Then you need to treat objectives, and of course at the end you need to engage. Get the order, right? Always be closing. So these are some of the things that the sales manager needs to be out working with their people. Very interesting Harvard Business Review, December 2010 article. 10%, 9.1% of sales meetings actually lead to a sales. So there's 90% of those sales meetings that just go to your cost, right? They surveyed 800 salespeople. They found that only 3 types were really effective in terms of getting the deal. That doesn't mean that the 5 others, because there's a total of 8, you scrap them and go out and hire new people. It means you help them, but you figure out who they are and where they need help. Last slide. It's not just about sales. This is a chart that summarizes the last 30 years. You know, as producers, we've gone from an environment to made to stock, from made to order, and now a lot of companies are big time into made to engineer. And the old model of having a bunch of salespeople there go out in the field, or distributors, isn't cutting it for a lot of those companies. Right now, there's a need for a lot more interaction between the salespeople and the engineering department to get engineers to go out in the field to do their part of what it takes to get the deal with the salespeople. And it's a major challenge for a lot of companies in the years to come. So that's where we are. Thank you very much.